What's going on, guys? So if you are like most RVers or shoot even homeowners, you probably are concerned about the risk of a fire potentially breaking out while you're either at the home or away, or maybe you're sleeping. And the risk of a fire is definitely one that concerns and stresses out a lot of folks. Again, especially if you own an RV, because RVs are very prone to fire because things can happen which can easily lead to a very, very hard to extinguish fire. So that being said, we're going to talk about the 3 items in front of me and how they may be able to give you a little bit of peace of mind, or a little more peace of mind, in the event a fire breaks out in either your home or your RV. So hang tight, I'll be right back. So, big disclaimer, none of the items in front of you were provided as part of any type of sponsorship or evaluation. I purchased all of these on my own. Actually, I got all 3 of them on Amazon, and this one's going to be very familiar to most. Maybe not the color of it, but the product itself. This is your standard ABC fire extinguisher, right? You simply pop the pin, point, shoot, and you're pretty much in good shape with something like this. You do want to keep an eye on the pressure. You want to keep an eye to make sure that it is still good. You want to get it inspected every now and then just to make sure that it's still going to work when you need it to work. So yeah, this one's in silver. This is a first alert model. Again, I bought this off of Amazon. This is an ABC fire extinguisher, and it's just the different classifications of fire or what this can actually put out. But this is probably the most common fire extinguisher people are going to have in their home or their RV. Oftentimes, the RV manufacturer will put one of these, or maybe one that's slightly smaller than this, in the RV. I know the Van Lee Beacon that we had actually came with a full size, or at least this size, of fire extinguisher. It's not a compact fire extinguisher, but it is certainly smaller than the full size fire extinguishers and relatively easy to handle. But this can definitely help in the event a fire breaks out. You just have to be able to get to it to be able to use it. And that's a problem a lot of people run into, or at least a problem they feel they'll run into. So let's say you have a fire that breaks out in the basement storage compartment of your RV while you're sleeping. Or let's say you have a generator and it heats something up and it catches fire, and you're in the bedroom, whether the bedroom be in the back or in the overhang of your fifth wheel. Well, if your fire extinguisher isn't readily available, you might be caught in a situation where a fire breaks out. You don't really have any means to get to something that could help you extinguish it. Or if you do have means to get to something like this, let's say it's in your kitchen or near the front door, you go to it, grab it, and by that time the fire is fully engulfed and you have a problem that you can't extinguish with the smaller fire extinguisher. Again, mainly because of the delay it takes to get to your fire extinguisher to actually use it. That's where these other 2 products come in handy. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I did a review on some products from a company called Protang. Essentially, it's a tube that has a fire suppressant inside of it, and it's under pressure. And when the tube reaches a certain temperature, it'll burst and release that extinguishing material and put a fire out. Now, in theory, the product looks like it would work very well. It looks like it would be a really, really great product to use. And what I'm going to say is I believe it probably would work 99% of the time if you can put it in an area that doesn't get too hot without a fire occurring. What I mean by that is, when I worked with them, they told me specific areas that I could use it, and I suggested specific areas that I would want to test it. One of those areas was under the hood, and another area was inside of my toolbox, simply because I keep equipment inside of my toolbox. Now, they sent me several products. I think it was like 7 tubes. And for the most part, most of those tubes would be placed in areas where it doesn't get overly hot when there's not a fire. But under the hood and in my toolbox were 2 areas that get really, really hot and there's no fire, simply because it's a contained kind of area. In a black toolbox, when it gets to be 100 degrees out here, the sun's hitting it, it gets pretty hot in there. And I'm imagining it probably gets upwards of maybe like 130, 140 plus degrees. Under the hood, it gets even hotter than that, of course, because you have the engine. And in the position where we had kind of researched and figured out we needed to place the tube based on the pictures I sent them, based on the feedback they provided me, was right at the very back of the engine compartment. And the problem we ran into was that area is directly above where the turbo is. And the turbo generated so much heat that it caused the tube to rupture without any fire actually occurring, just because of the amount of heat. And the pressure that came out of that tube, which in most cases, if there were a fire, would be good, but it worked negatively for me because it actually caused some damage underneath the hood. It actually completely ripped off the NOx sensor underneath the hood. It blew down a lot of the heat shielding on the firewall between the actual engine and the cab, and I had to replace all of that. So, my frustration with that product was more in the fact that because it went off when there was not a fire, it actually caused a condition where my truck was damaged when there was no fire. So it not only only didn't solve for a bad situation, it made a situation that wasn't bad become a bad situation. And that's the reason why I wouldn't put it back underneath my engine compartment unless it was positioned differently and we moved it away from any really, really hot heat sources. Now, that being said, the one in the toolbox most certainly was not near anything that would get that hot, and it went off inside of my toolbox. It didn't damage anything, but it ripped off some zip ties and did some other things. Now, one of those things to keep in mind is that even though it's not rated for like a lithium fire, and I had some lithium batteries or lithium-ion batteries for drills and stuff in the back, that wasn't really the purpose. The purpose was if something else caught fire, it would extinguish it. I wasn't specifically targeting if a lithium-ion battery for a power drill caught fire. It was just something else in there potentially catching fire, and it seemed like a smart place to put it, simply because, you know, you never know what could actually happen inside of the toolbox of your vehicle because you can't see it and it gets really hot in there. So placing it around the top edge of the toolbox the way I had it was just more of a precautionary thing in the event something in the toolbox did catch fire. Again, understanding that it may not be rated for a lithium fire, but just the fact that it was placed in the toolbox lid or right on the bottom of the toolbox lid, it was spaced out from anything, so it wasn't pressing against anything except the top of the toolbox lid where it was mounted with zip ties. The fact that it discharged really worried me because it made me feel that, okay, so at what temperature is it truly going to go off, considering, you know, a toolbox with nothing inside of it that's generating heat other than the sun hitting it and creating that radiant heat inside of the toolbox. If that's able to set it off, could I potentially be, you know, possibly putting it in an area on the RV that might do the same thing? When there's no fire, the thing releases with so much energy just because it gets really hot that it actually creates damage, and that damage could potentially lead to a fire or a short or something else. So that's the reason why I discontinued using the product. It wasn't because I didn't believe that the product wouldn't do what they claim it would do. It's because I didn't feel safe in the event that the product went off prematurely in an environment where there was no fire, that the amount of pressure could cause something to be damaged, which could potentially then lead to a problem, whether it's a fire or whether it's a malfunctioning, you know, piece of equipment or something disconnected. And I just wanted to avoid that. So instead, I've kind of moved to these other products. I've added a ton of fire extinguishers. I think most RVers learn pretty quickly that it's good to put fire extinguishers where they're readily available all throughout your RV, underneath your RV, in your tow vehicle, everything. Fire extinguishers are certainly something that I carry a lot of, and I carry them in just about every important area that I would need to get to them, both in my RV, the truck, as well as our home. Now, and my garage, actually. This is one of 3 that I keep in my garage. Now, these 2 products are very cool. Both of these I got off of Amazon, even though I don't think this one is for sale on Amazon anymore. I believe you can buy this through Walmart or a few other places. I'll put a link in the description to both of these just to help you get to one quicker if you're looking, though. This right here is so unique because it kind of acts in the same way as one of those, you know, passive fire suppression systems. But the way this works is you have this giant ball, and they call this a fire extinguisher ball. This thing is pretty good size, and you position it like this, and you have this little wire thing right here. You mount this to your wall right there, and let's say you have an area that you are concerned could potentially lead to a fire, like a water heater, or, you know, in your RV, maybe above your batteries, or maybe above your battery bank, or some area, maybe your inverter, and you just don't want the risk that if a fire breaks out there, you won't be able to get to it in time with your trusty old ABC fire extinguisher. Well, what this does is it also releases fire extinguishant material, and this does it in kind of this pressurized powder form where it kind of pops, bursts open, and spreads it everywhere. And the only way this actually releases is if it's exposed to direct fire for, I think, 3 to 5 seconds. Yep, 3 to 5 seconds right there. And by the time the flame reaches 70 degrees Celsius, the AFO will automatically extinguish the fire effectively and rapidly. And it does it by means of like a powder fire extinguishing material. Now, these have really, really good reviews, and they have these in a few different sizes. When I first started ordering these for around the house, I got them in a real small, maybe like a softball size. And then this is more like a melon size. So this is probably 6 inches in diameter, where the other ones are about 4 or 3.5 inches in diameter. And I placed them everywhere. I mean, I put them above electrical panels. I've put them inside of, you know, areas where equipment may generate heat and catch fire. It's peace of mind. and even above like the fuse or the breaker boxes in the attic next to the air handlers for the air conditioner. Just places like that. Just keep in mind, in an RV environment, because it sits in this basket and the thing's pretty heavy, that it could, you know, bounce up and down if you're hitting a lot of bumps. The way I would recommend using this is you take the ball out of the basket when you're traveling, and when you are getting to where you're going, you put the ball inside, and then you just keep this inside of a cushioned area so it doesn't bounce around and jostle too much. That's what I would do with this. Now, the third and final item we're going to look at today is this really innovative solution called Stovetop Firestop. I could think of several ways to use this. The intended way is that you mount this above your stove. So basically what happens is on your stove you have your vent hood, and then you simply attach this to the bottom side of that area, and in the event that there's a fire, these actually have fuses. You may or may not be able to see them. That's actually your mounting piece right there, and on the bottom side is a fuse. If the fire reaches the fuse, it ignites the fuse, it makes its way up to the top, and then it releases all this chemical fire extinguishing material onto the fire. So the thought behind this is that if you have a grease fire in your home or your RV, and it gets really, really tall to the point to where it's starting to lap maybe up around the actual air intake or the vent hood, that this will be hanging about maybe 3 inches below it. It'll ignite the little fuse here and it will release the chemical suppressant onto the fire. So this is really cool. All of these items have really good reviews. They have really good reviews. They're not anything I've personally had to try. I might do a video at some point demonstrating if they work or not, but they're all relatively expensive. So it's stuff that if you put your money into, you don't really want to use unless you have to. You kind of rely on the reviews of people who have seen these in action and actually use them, and it saved their home or it's gotten them out of a really nasty situation to you know, base your purchase on, and that's what I certainly did. But these are really cool, and I could even see these being used in a different environment, right? You could hang something like this perhaps above your batteries in your RV. You could probably hang something like this above the stove, right? Just the way it's designed to be used in a home, but in your RV above your stove. You could probably put these above like a water heater or perhaps a furnace, or even above your inverter. Basically areas where if heat is generated, you have a way of preventatively extinguishing it before it turns into something that is uncontrollable. And it gives you that extra time you need to possibly get to your trusty old ABC fire extinguisher. So a scenario that you might think of is, let's say that you have some type of a short underneath the basement area in your RV. Let's say it's a battery. The battery causes a wire to melt that leads to a fire. If I have this underneath there, the fire gets to it, this thing bursts, hopefully it puts the fire out, right? If I have this above it, this is going to release the chemical onto the fire, hopefully putting the fire out. But if the fire is a little bit too intense per se for either one of these may buy me enough time to get to my trusty old ABC fire extinguisher, or to get my family out safe so I can start fighting the fire. And if they buy you even 2 minutes or even 30 seconds, that may be the difference between life and death. That may be the difference between a manageable fire that you can put out with an extinguisher versus a fire that the fire department's going to have to put out with a hose. So again, none of these are going to guarantee that you don't have a fire. None of these are going to guarantee that a fire can be extinguished. None of these are going to guarantee that you can even make it out safely. All these are preventative measures to help give you more peace of mind and hopefully give you more time to do what you need to do. Fires are very dangerous. They can spread quickly. They can get to areas. They can be behind or inside of walls. Basically anywhere where they can get oxygen, they can spread to. And some materials are extremely flammable. So having something that can potentially buy you the time you need to get to safety is pretty important. And for me, it's super important. And I think most of you with families out there, most of you who, you know, camp or RV, and, you know, any homeowners, you probably can agree with that. That's why I have a lot of these and I place them everywhere. Trusty old fire extinguishers, fireballs, as well as these stovetops. And in my opinion, it's just that peace of mind that you get from knowing that you have things in place that can potentially delay something extremely devastating. Anyways, guys, again, I will put links to all of this stuff in the description of this video if this is stuff you may be interested in getting for your home, your RV, your trailer, your garage, you know, just areas like that. And, you know, you want that extra peace of mind. So check out the description if you're looking for this stuff. Guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.